World War II is usually explained through ideology, military strategy, and political ambition. But wars of this scale are never fought by weapons alone. They are financed, sustained, and ultimately decided by economic systems. Long before the first bombs fell, a financial war was already underway. Nations were mobilizing capital, restructuring industries, manipulating currencies, and redefining the relationship between state and economy. The Second World War was not only a clash of armies, it was a global experiment in economic transformation under extreme pressure. The roots of World War II lie deep in the economic wreckage of World War I. The Treaty of Versailles imposed crushing financial penalties on Germany, dismantling its industrial base and destabilizing its currency. Reparations were not just punitive, they were economically impossible. The result was hyperinflation, mass unemployment, and social collapse. These conditions did not merely weaken Germany, they radicalized it. Economic humiliation became fertile ground for political extremism. Hyperinflation destroyed trust in money itself. Savings evaporated. Contracts became meaningless. When currency fails, society fractures. Germany's financial collapse was not an accident. It was the direct outcome of a system that attempted to extract wealth without regard for productive capacity. By the early 1930s, economic despair had rewritten political possibilities across Europe. The Great Depression transformed regional instability into global crisis. International trade collapsed. Credit froze. Governments abandoned balanced budgets and orthodox economics. Survival replaced restraint. In this environment, rearmament became not only a military strategy, but an economic one. War promised jobs, industrial revival, and centralized control over production. Nazi Germany rebuilt its economy through massive state-directed spending. Deficit financing, price controls, and rearmament masked structural weakness behind short-term growth. Unemployment disappeared, not because productivity soared, but because the economy was militarized. War preparation became the engine of recovery, but this system was unsustainable. It required continuous expansion, territorial conquest, and access to foreign resources. Germany's economic model demanded war. Without conquest, it would collapse under its own financial weight. Access to oil, food, labor, and raw materials was not optional. It was existential. Economic necessity merged with ideological ambition. Expansion became policy. Britain entered the war economically unprepared for total conflict. Its empire provided resources, but its finances were strained. The war forced Britain to abandon gold standards, impose rationing, and place the state at the center of economic life. Survival required unprecedented coordination between government, industry, and labor. The United States initially stood apart, but even before entering the war, it became the financial backbone of the Allied cause. Through Lend-Lease, American industry supplied weapons, food, and machinery on a scale never seen before. This was not charity. It was strategic investment. War production ended the Great Depression more decisively than any domestic policy. American economic strength rested on scale, productivity, and access to capital. Unlike Europe, the United States fought the war without destruction at home. Its factories expanded while others burned. By 1943, American output exceeded that of all Axis powers combined. Economic dominance translated directly into military inevitability. Total war transformed labor itself. Women entered factories en masse. Governments regulated wages, prices, and employment. The distinction between civilian and military economies vanished. Productivity became a weapon. Efficiency became survival. The Axis economies faced fatal constraints. Germany lacked oil. Japan lacked raw materials. Their supply chains were fragile and easily disrupted. Strategic bombing targeted not just cities, but production capacity. War became an economic strangulation. Industrial destruction crippled output. No amount of ideology could replace steel, fuel, and logistics. Economic reality overpowered military ambition. By late war, Axis defeat was mathematically inevitable. Armies without supplies do not fight, they collapse. The financial systems of the Axis imploded under prolonged strain. Inflation returned. Scarcity spread. Control replaced coordination. Even before victory, the Allies planned the financial architecture of peace. They understood what the previous war had taught too late. Economic collapse breeds future conflict. A new system would be required. As the war approached its conclusion, Allied leaders understood that military victory alone would not guarantee lasting stability. The true danger lay in the economic vacuum that follows total destruction. Europe's industrial base was shattered. Currencies were unstable. Trade networks were broken. If left unmanaged, post-war scarcity could recreate the same conditions that had produced extremism 2 decades earlier. This time, economic planning became a strategic priority before the war even ended. In 1944, representatives from 44 nations met at Bretton Woods to design a new global financial system. Their objective was simple but unprecedented: prevent another economic collapse from triggering global war. The solution was a managed monetary order anchored by stability, coordination, and American economic power. The dollar replaced gold as the central pillar of the global system. Other currencies were pegged to it. Stability replaced speculation. The United States emerged not just as a military victor, but as the financial core of the post-war world. This arrangement institutionalized American dominance, but also global stability. New institutions enforced discipline and liquidity. The IMF stabilized currencies. The World Bank financed reconstruction. Economic coordination replaced isolation. Growth replaced desperation. The lesson of the interwar period had been absorbed. The Marshall Plan rebuilt Europe not as charity, but as strategic investment. Prosperity was seen as security. Productive economies became the foundation of political stability. This marked a radical shift in how power was exercised. Reconstruction restored productivity faster than expected. Trade resumed. Employment surged. The post-war boom was not accidental. It was engineered. Economic design replaced economic improvisation. A broad middle class emerged. Consumption expanded. Stability became self-reinforcing. Unlike the aftermath of World War I, this peace had an economic foundation. Where economic integration occurred, stability followed. Where it did not, division hardened. The Cold War was shaped as much by financial systems as by ideology. The world had learned that economic collapse is not neutral. It reshapes politics, society, and power. World War II proved that economics does not merely support war, it determines its outcome. Military strategy decides battles. Economic systems decide wars. Productivity, logistics, and financial credibility proved more decisive than ideology or ambition. World War II revealed a permanent truth. Nations that can mobilize capital, labor, and industry efficiently will dominate prolonged conflict. The Axis lost not only because they were defeated militarily, but because their economies collapsed under pressure. War exposed structural limits they could not overcome. The post-war order was not inevitable. It was designed, deliberately, to prevent economic failure from turning into global catastrophe again. World War II was won on factory floors, balance sheets, and supply chains, as much as on battlefields. Its true legacy is not just military victory, but the financial architecture that reshaped the modern world.